The Battle of France, also known as the Fall of France, was the German invasion of France and the Low Countries during the Second World War. Beginning on 10 May 1940, German forces defeated Allied forces in a series of mobile operations, eventually leading to the conquest of France, Belgium, Luxembourg and the Netherlands, bringing land operations on the Western Front to an end until 1944. The German plan for the invasion of France consisted of two main operations. In Fall Gelb, German armoured units pushed through the Ardennes and then along the Somme valley to cut off and surround the Allied units that had advanced into Belgium to meet the expected German threat. When British, Belgian and adjacent French forces were pushed back to the sea by the mobile and well-organized German operation, the British government decided to evacuate the British Expeditionary Force as well as several French divisions at Dunkirk in Operation Dynamo. After the withdrawal of the BEF, the German forces launched a second operation, Fall Rot, on 5 June 1940. While the depleted French forces put up stiff initial resistance, German air superiority and armoured mobility overwhelmed the remaining French forces. German armour outflanked the Maginot Line and pushed deep into France, with German forces arriving in Paris unopposed on 14 June. This caused a chaotic period of flight for the French government and ended organized French military resistance. German commanders met with French officials on 18 June with the goal of forcing the new French government to accept all of the agreements in an armistice offered by Germany. Chief among the government leaders was Marshal Philippe Pétain, the newly appointed Prime Minister and one of the supporters of an armistice. On the 22nd of June, the second armistice at Compiègne was signed by France and Germany, which resulted in a division of France, whereby Germany would occupy the north and west. Italy would control a small occupation zone in the southeast and an unoccupied zone. The Zone Libre would be governed by the Vichy government led by Marshal Pétain. France remained under Axis occupation until the reconquest of France by the Allies after the Allied landings in June 1944. Prelude. In 1939, Britain and France offered military support to Poland in the likely case of a German invasion. In the dawn of 1 September 1939, the German invasion of Poland began. France and the United Kingdom declared war on 3 September, after an ultimatum for German forces to immediately withdraw the forces from Poland was met without reply. Following this, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa and Canada declared war on Germany. British and French commitments to Poland were met politically, but they adopted a long war strategy and mobilized for defensive land operations against Germany, while a trade blockade was imposed and the pre-war rearmament was accelerated, ready for an eventual invasion of Germany. On 7 September, in accordance with their alliance with Poland, France began the Saar offensive with an advance from the Maginot Line 5 kilometers into the German-occupied Saar. France had mobilized 98 divisions and 2,500 tanks against a German force consisting of 43 divisions and no tanks. The French advanced until they met the then thin and undermanned Siegfried Line. On 17 September, the French Supreme Commander, Maurice Gamelin, gave the order to withdraw French troops to the starting positions. The last of them left Germany on 17 October. Following the Saar offensive, a period of inaction called the Phony War set in between the belligerents. Adolf Hitler had hoped that France and Britain would acquiesce in the conquest of Poland and quickly make peace. On 6 October, he made a peace offer to both Western powers, even before they had time to respond. On 9 October, he also formulated a new military policy in case the the reply was negative. Führer Directive No. 6. Hitler recognized the necessity of military campaigns to defeat the Western European nations, preliminary to the conquest of territory in Eastern Europe, to avoid a two-front war, but these intentions were absent from Directive N Degree 6. The plan was based on the seemingly more realistic assumption that German military strength would have to be built up for several years. For the moment, only limited objectives could be envisaged and were aimed at improving Germany's ability to survive a long war in the West. Hitler ordered a conquest of the Low Countries to be executed at the shortest possible notice. This would forestall the French and prevent Allied air power from threatening the vital German Ruhr area. It would also provide the basis for a long-term air and sea campaign against Britain. There was no mention in the Führer Directive of any immediate consecutive attack to conquer the whole of France, although the directive read that as much as possible of the border areas in northern France should be occupied. At first, Hitler proposed beginning the invasion on the 25th of October 1939, but accepted that the date was probably unrealistic. On the 5th of November, he informed Walther von Brauchitsch that he planned for the invasion to begin on the 12th of November. The general replied that the military had largely not recovered from the Polish campaign. The motorized units had to recover. Repairing the damage to the vehicles and ammunition stocks were largely depleted. Brauchitsch offered to resign if Hitler did not change his mind. His resignation was refused, but 2 days later Hitler postponed the attack, providing poor weather as the official reason for the delay. German strategy. Similarity to Schlieffen Plan. On the 10th of October 1939, the British refused Hitler's offer of peace. On the 12th of October, the French did the same. Franz Halder presented the first plan for Fall Gelb on the 19th of October. This was the pre-war code name of plans for a campaign in the Low Countries. The Aufmarsch and Weisungen Degree 1, Fall Gelb. Halder's plan has been compared to the Schlieffen Plan, the name given to the German strategy of 1914 in the First World War. It was similar in that both plans entailed an advance through the middle of Belgium. Aufmarsch and Weisungen Degree 1 envisioned a frontal attack, sacrificing a projected 500,000 German soldiers to attain the limited goal of throwing the Allies back to the River Somme. Germany's strength for 1940 would then be spent. Only in 1942 could the main attack against France begin. Hitler was disappointed with Halder's plan and initially reacted by deciding that the German army should attack early, ready or not, in the hope that Allied unreadiness might bring about an easy victory. This led to a series of postponements as commanders repeatedly persuaded Hitler to delay the attack for a few days or weeks, to remedy some critical defect in the preparations or to wait for better weather. Hitler also tried to alter the plan, which he found unsatisfactory. His weak understanding of how poorly prepared Germany was for war and how it would cope with losses of armored vehicles were not fully considered. Though Germany defeated Poland in a relatively short time, many armored vehicles had been lost and were hard to replace. This eventually resulted in a dispersion of the German effort, although the main axis would remain in central Belgium. Secondary attacks would be undertaken on the flanks. Hitler made such a suggestion on the 11th of November, pressing for an early attack on unprepared targets. On the 29th of October, Halder presented another plan, Aufmarsch and Weisungen Degree 2, Fall Gelb, reflecting these changes by featuring a secondary attack on the Netherlands. Hitler was not alone in disliking Halder's plan. General Gerd von Rundstedt, the commander of Army Group A, also disagreed with it. Rundstedt recognized that it did not adhere to the classic principles of the Bewegungskrieg that had guided German strategy since the 19th century. A breakthrough would have to be accomplished that would result in the encirclement and destruction of the main body of Allied forces. The most practical place to achieve this would be in the region of Sedan, which lay in the sector of Rundstedt's army group. On the 21st of October, Rundstedt agreed with his Chief of Staff, General-Lieutenant Erich von Manstein, that an alternative operational plan had to be arranged that would reflect these basic ideas, by making Army Group A as strong as possible at the expense of Army Group B to the north. Manstein plan. While Manstein was formulating new plans in Koblenz, General-Lieutenant Heinz Guderian, commander of the 19th Army Corps, Germany's elite armored formation, happened to be lodged in a nearby hotel. At this moment, Manstein's plan consisted of a move directly north from Sedan against the rear of the main Allied forces in Belgium. When Guderian was invited to contribute to the plan during informal discussions, Manstein proposed a radical and novel idea. Not only his army corps, but most of the Panzerwaffe should be concentrated at Sedan. This concentration of armor should subsequently not move to the north but to the west, to execute a swift, deep, independent strategic penetration towards the English Channel without waiting for the main body of infantry divisions. This might lead to a strategic collapse of the enemy, avoiding the relatively high number of casualties normally caused by Kesselschlacht. Such a risky independent use of armor had been widely discussed in Germany before the war but had not been accepted as received doctrine. The German General Staff, however, doubted such an operation could work. Manstein's operational idea won immediate support from Guderian. Guderian understood the terrain, having experienced the conditions with the German army in 1914 and 1918. Manstein wrote his first memorandum outlining the alternative plan on 31 October. In it he carefully avoided mentioning Guderian's name and played down the strategic part of the armored units, to avoid unnecessary resistance. 6 more memoranda followed between the 31st of October 1939 and the 12th of January 1940, each becoming more radical. All were rejected by the Oberkommando des Heeres and nothing of the content reached Hitler. Mechlin incident. The German attack was now planned to begin on the 17th of January 1940. However, on the 10th of January, a German Messerschmitt Bf 108 made a forced landing outside the Belgian town of Mechelen de Mars, north of Maastricht along the Meuse River, in what is referred to as the Mechlin incident. Among the occupants of the aircraft was Luftwaffe Major Helmuth Rheinberger, who was carrying a copy of the latest version of Aufmarsch Weisung N Degree 2. Rheinberger was unable to destroy the documents, which quickly fell into the hands of the Belgian intelligence services. It has often been suggested that this incident was the cause of a drastic change in German plans, but this is incorrect. In fact, a reformulation of them on the 30th of January, Aufmarsch Weisung N Degree 3, Fall Gelb, conformed to the earlier versions. Adoption of the Manstein Plan. On the 27th of January, Manstein was relieved of his appointment as Chief of Staff of Army Group A and appointed commander of an army corps in Prussia. His command was to begin in Stettin on the 9th of February, a move instigated by Halder to reduce Manstein's influence. Manstein's indignant staff brought his case to Hitler's attention. Hitler had, without any knowledge of Manstein's plan, plan suggested an attack focused at Sedan, but had been persuaded to forget the idea as too risky. On the 2nd of February, von Manstein's plan was brought to his attention. On the 17th of February, Hitler summoned Manstein, Generals Rudolf Schmundt and Alfred Jodl, the chief of operations at the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, to attend a conference. In the end, he agreed to all of Manstein's suggestions. The next day, he ordered the plans to be changed in accordance with Manstein's ideas. They appealed to Hitler mainly because they offered some real hope of a total victory. Hitler recognized the breakthrough at Sedan only in tactical terms, whereas Manstein saw it as a means to an end. He envisaged an operation to the English Channel and the encirclement of the Allied armies in Belgium, which, if carried out correctly, could have a favorable strategic outcome. Halder had no intention of deviating from established doctrine by allowing an independent strategic penetration by the 7 armored divisions of Army Group A. Much to the outrage of Guderian, this element was at first completely removed from the new plan, Aufmarschenweisung and Degree 4, Fall Gelb, issued on the 24th of February. However, Halder went through an astonishing change of opinion. Halder was criticized in the same way he had attacked Manstein when he first proposed his attack plan. The bulk of the German officer corps was appalled by the plan, and they called Halder the gravedigger of the panzer force. Even when adapted to more conventional methods, the new plan provoked a storm of protest from the majority of German generals. They thought it utterly irresponsible to create a concentration of forces in a position where they could not possibly be sufficiently supplied, while such inadequate supply routes as there were could easily be cut off by the French. If the Allies did not react as expected, the German offensive could end in catastrophe. Their objections were ignored. Halder argued that, as Germany's strategic position seemed hopeless anyway, even the slightest chance of a decisive victory outweighed the certainty of ultimate defeat implied by inaction. Allied strategy. Early actions. In September 1939, Belgium was still neutral, having ended the Franco-Belgian Accord of 1920 in 1936. The country did not allow the French to inspect its defences until March 1940, when a single French brigadier in civilian clothes received permission and viewed the weak state from his automobile. The Netherlands was also neutral but had made contacts in secret with the Entente for future cooperation should the Germans invade. Gamelin suggested during that month that the Allies should take advantage of the fact that Germany was tied up in Poland by using the Low Countries as a springboard to attack Germany. This suggestion was not taken up by the French government. Dahlplan strategic reasons dictated the Allied decision to advance and fight on Belgian territory when the German attack came in the west. The French determined that the German offensive had to be contained as far east as possible to keep the battles off French territory. Finally, and for him personally, the most cogent argument for advancing and fighting on Belgian territory was that Gamelin did not consider the French army capable of winning a mobile battle against the German army in the wide operational theatre France would present. Belgium presented a far narrower front to contain German formations. He also argued that advancing to the Daal River and preparing an entrenched front that would prevent most of Belgium's industrial regions from falling into German hands. Gamelin did not have the personality to simply impose his will. The first step he took was to propose the Esker variant as an option for Plan D, the code for the Daal Plan. This would include an advance by the French onto Dutch territory. The powerful French First Army and Ninth Army would hold the line in Belgium from Wavre to Givet. The Seventh Army would hold the line on the Scheldt and link up with Dutch forces. The Belgian army would hold the Ghent-Antwerp line. They would be reinforced by the British Expeditionary Force, which would hold the section of the line east of Brussels, from Waver to Leuven. Gamelin made the reasonable assumption that the Germans would try to attempt a breakthrough by concentrating the mechanized forces. They could hardly hope to break the Maginot line on his right flank or to overcome the Allied concentration of forces on the left flank. That only left the centre, but most of the centre was covered by the river Meuse meandering in the difficult Ardennes terrain. Tanks were of limited use in defeating fortified river positions. However, at Namur the river made a sharp turn to the east, creating a gap between itself and the river Dyle. This Gembloux gap, ideal for mechanized warfare, was a very dangerous weak spot. Gamelin decided to concentrate half of his armoured reserves there. Sure, the main German thrust would be on the Belgian-Dutch plain. Gamelin reasoned that the Germans might try to overcome the Meuse position by using infantry, but he was confident in the Belgians' ability to hold the line and believed that while it was possible for the Germans to cross the Meuse, it would take a long time to achieve. Gamelin made no study in the event of a German breakthrough in the south, and as a consequence, did not make preparations to extricate Allied forces from Belgium. Gamelin continued with his plans despite repeated criticism from his subordinates. Gaston Bilot and Alphonse-Joseph Georges were particularly critical. Georges pointed out the decisive problem. He suggested that Gamelin was too sure the German plan involved the battles, or main effort, being fought in the Netherlands and Belgium. He argued that it seemed as if Gamelin was allowing himself to be drawn into the Low Countries. He even suggested that an attack in Belgium might be a diversion. In this case, if the main forces were sent into Belgium and the main enemy attack came in our centre, on our front between the Meuse and the Moselle, we could be deprived of the necessary means to repel it. Franco-British strategy was determined by the French, since the British contributed fewer troops and because the battle would take place in France. Allied intelligence in the winter of 1939-40, the Belgian consul general in Cologne had anticipated the angle of advance that Manstein was planning. Through intelligence reports, they deduced that German forces were concentrating along the Belgian and Luxembourg frontiers. The Belgians were convinced that the Germans would thrust through the hilly and heavily forested Ardennes onto the English Channel with the aim of cutting off the Allied field armies in Belgium and northeastern France. They also anticipated that the Germans would try to land airborne and glider forces behind the Allied lines to break open Belgian fortifications. Such warnings were not heeded by the French or British. In March 1940, Swiss intelligence detected 6 or 7 panzer divisions on the German-Luxembourg-Belgian border. More motorized divisions had also been detected in the area. French intelligence were informed through aerial reconnaissance that the Germans were constructing pontoon bridges partially about halfway over the Our River on the Luxembourg-German border. The French military attaché in the Swiss capital, Bern, warned that the center of the German assault would come on the Meuse at Sedan, sometime between 8 and the 10th of May. The report was dated the 30th of April. These reports had little effect on Gamelin, as did similar reports from neutral sources such as the Vatican, and a French pilot's sighting of a 100-kilometer-long line of German armored vehicles inside Germany to the Luxembourg border.